Hello, I'm Dr. Leon Stutzman, aka Doc, with another one of these little videos designed to help you to get through these strange days in which we find ourselves, and these are strange days indeed. It was an exercise in thinking outside of the box. I don't even like the phrase thinking outside of the box. It's a cliche, and oftentimes using cliches just indicate you're inside of the box, but it was an exercise in thinking outside of the box. I had said to our congregation for years it would be less expensive to drive an old Rolls Royce than it would be to buy or lease a new Cadillac. And they all laughed. They thought that was odd thinking. Eventually, I came into a little bit of money and I went out and I paid cash for a 1984 Rolls Royce Silver Spur, 20 years old. It ran like a sewing machine. It drove like a tank. And it was absolutely the slowest vehicle I have ever owned. But I drove it for 3 years. I enjoyed driving it. I liked the notoriety of it. Everyone's talking about that preacher in town driving a Rolls Royce, not realizing that I paid less for that Rolls Royce than any of them would have paid for a new Chevrolet. I kept meticulous records, and even accounting the fact that the Rolls Royce only got 10 miles to a gallon of gas, it was less expensive to drive that old Rolls Royce than it was to drive a new Cadillac. I eventually sold the Rolls because, well, as I've said, it was the slowest vehicle that I have ever driven, but it was fun while I had it. You have to learn to think outside of the box, outside of your circumscribed parameters in times of change. And we're certainly living in times of change. That's one of the hallmarks of these strange days in which we find ourselves. These are times of change. If you live inside of your comfort zone, if you're circumscribed by your parameters, if you're living inside of the box, you'll not make the changes necessary to experience God's best in your life in these strange days. They did an experiment years ago. They put fleas in a jar, put the lid on the jar, and the little fleas would try to get out of the jar. They jump up and they hit the top of the lid. They jump up and they hit the top of the lid. They jump up and they'd hit the top of the lid. Eventually they took the lid off of the jar, but the fleas never escaped. Why? Because they jump up so high. They were so used to hitting the top of the lid that they didn't jump any higher, and so they could not escape. You're circumscribed by your thoughts. What are you thinking? We had a dog years ago. His name was Moose. He was a sweet dog, but he was absolutely scariest looking dog you've ever seen. He was a mix between a Rottweiler and a St. Bernard. He looked like the biggest Rottweiler that you've ever seen. He looked like Cujo. We had him inside of an invisible fence, and he soon learned the parameters of the yard. He didn't like getting shocked by the invisible fence, and so he never went near the edge of the yard. Eventually, the invisible fence went down, and for the 3 weeks it was down, in fact, we didn't even know it was down because Moose stayed inside of the yard. Why? Because he was circumscribed by his parameters. He couldn't go beyond his understanding or his thinking. You'll never go beyond your understanding or your thinking. There's a verse of scripture I love quoting. It's one of my most oft-quoted verses of scripture. Ephesians 3, verse 20. Now to him that's able to do exceedingly abundantly, above all that we can ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. God is limited by your thinking. Now to him that's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that you can ask or think, according to the power that works in us. But if you can't ask it, if you can't think it, God can't do it. I want to encourage you to take the limit off of God this week by expanding your thinking and expanding your consciousness. Wednesday, I'll show you how. Friday, I'll show you how. It's going to be powerful stuff for people that want to prevail in these strange days in which we find ourselves. And then this Sunday, I'm starting a brand new series of messages called The Power of Prophetic Persuasion. You have to be persuaded. And I believe that this series of messages will be quite persuasive and cause you to embrace the prophetic. And when you embrace the prophetic, anything can happen in your life. Some good things are going to come out of it. I know that they are. Catch it Sunday morning on the live stream, 10 o'clock at AspireChurch.tv. That's live stream AspireChurch.tv, or on Facebook at Aspire Church TV. Facebook Aspire Church TV, live stream AspireChurch.tv. Once again, 10 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time this Sunday morning. It's going to be powerful. I'm Dr. Leon Stutzman. I'll be back Wednesday with another little video. I'll show you how to expand your thinking, expand your consciousness, and take the limits off of God.